welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Socratic Cinema. My name is Charlie Heatherly.
I'm Hallie Phillips.
I'm James Delicio.
And I'm Rachel Delicio.
And for this episode, we all watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, an absolutely lovely film. And before we go any further, I would just like to say Casey has died. She's deceased. We had the funeral already. So she's not going to be on this episode, but it's just a one-time thing. Hopefully, well, we'll see if she can reanimate from the dead. I don't know, but we just have a very special guest. We have Rachel, which is James's sister.
Yeah, very exciting, very cool.
And I think she has a wonderful summary of the movie.
Yeah, so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood follows kind of, I would say, a has-been actor as he kind of realizes his impeding obsolescence and kind of how he grapples with that. And he is often seen with his stunt double, Cliff, who kind of ends up being the movie's hero. So Cliff, Rick's stunt double, also kind of becomes obsolete because when your main actor isn't being used, obviously their stunt double isn't being used. So they both kind of together go on this journey trying to figure out their next step and what that looks like for their careers. At the same time, their story kind of intertwines with Sharon Tate and her family who live next door. And we get little snippets of what happens to lead up to the fateful night of the Tate murders by the Manson family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really did not know that the Manson family was going to be in this movie. I didn't know what the Manson family was going in, but I didn't know what the trailers did a really good job of not telling you anything anything about the plot of the movie at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very nice to just kind of watch it unravel.
I know. I was going to say, I kind of appreciated that about the trailer. That really going into it, I feel like the draw for a lot of people was okay, this is Quentin Tarantino. He has this cult following, and he's managed to get this completely star-studded cast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, so he has the cult following, and he decided to make a cult movie, but he's very good at doing alternate histories, because Inglourious Basterds is probably my favorite Tarantino film, and I like that for a very specific reason, because we all know how Hitler dies, right?
Yeah.
He kills himself in the bunker, but in Inglourious Basterds, it's this massive, movie theater fire shootout crazy thing, and it's the most ingenious and phantasmagoric event of blood and fire and guts and glory that you've ever seen. But in this movie, it's sort of a similar thing where we get to see, we expect a Charles Manson, my namesake, to come back in and sort of, obviously kill Sharon Tate, but completely redirects that. And once the climax of the movie happens, I personally thought there was another hour of the movie left, because I was so enwrapped in this beautiful, beautiful story that was crafted. I thought it was going to go on for even longer, but the ending that they have in there is a perfect conclusion to the entire movie, and I think it is much better than if he decided to go with the real history of the Sharon Tate murders.
Would have been very anticlimactic, but also not I feel like it wouldn't be out of the ballpark for Tarantino to just do what actually happened. Here's the main characters you've been following for 3 hours, they're all dead. He's that kind of guy. But I think the whole climax of the movie, the last 40 minutes were just great, phenomenal. Should we talk about the pacing of the movie? Because it's got a lot of buzz for being 3 hours, with the first two kind of just being
for sure, yeah,
driving around LA.
It's a masterpiece in pacing, and I only say that because I didn't realize. I mean, like I said, the movie was over when it was over. I thought there was an hour of the movie left. I knew it was a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
I thought that I had only been in there for 2, and to think that time had warped like that is just such a tribute to Tarantino's genius and the way that he structures films. Although the movie is incredibly slow at some points, it's never not interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. I didn't get bored. There wasn't a point. I feel like a lot of the times when I'm sitting in a movie theater, I'm I really wish I could pause this and go get up and stretch and think about it a little bit. But in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there wasn't a point where I was okay, I'm getting bored. Like you were saying, some parts the pacing is pretty slow, but overall it all flows so nicely. And Tarantino, I think, did an amazing job of really leaving you wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
I could use a sequel of the movie already, and
Yeah, I want to see more Brad Pitt action. He was the best part of the movie.
he's my favorite character from any Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
Cliff Booth is such, he's just so cool.
It's like you want to be him.
I know, oh my god, when he beat up Bruce Lee and threw him into the car, I was like, yes, go, Cliff.
Yeah, that was a really cool scene. Apparently, some people were kind of offended by it, like it's dishonoring Bruce Lee's legacy. Cowards, yeah.
Nobody's perfect, and I understand that if your hero's Bruce Lee, then you hold him to this, really lofty degree. A similar modern day comparison would sort of be The Rock, where he's this giant fighting star who everyone thinks is this really good and wise guy. But I'm not saying The Rock's a bad guy or anything. I don't know, but it would be the equivalent of seeing The Rock portrayed in a bad light in a modern day movie, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't happen,
and it just doesn't happen, and it would feel wrong. So I guess if Bruce Lee is a hero of yours, then you're like, no, this is horrible, but. It's true that he was he was filled with braggadocio and, loved to,
yeah, 5-syllable
five
word.
syllables.
You're at 2 5-syllable words? Phantasmagoric braggadocio.
Gosh,
you're on a roll.
I'm so good today. I don't know what it is. Shakespeare and Latin. It's coming together for me. But, but where was I? I was on a point.
Brad.
Oh, no, yeah, so Bruce Lee, it's very true that he would brag about his ability to beat people, and I think that Quentin Tarantino, this might be entirely wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I think in an interview he did say that he read a biography of Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee's wife said something along similar lines where Bruce Lee would say, oh yeah, I could totally beat up a Mike Tyson or whoever he was trying to say he could beat up in the movie.
I think it was...
Mike Tyson's the only boxer I know. That's why.
Yeah, I don't really remember who.
I can't remember.
I'm not sure. Did you write it down on any of your napkins?
Oh no,
yeah.
I did not. No, but the whole scene with Bruce Lee and Cliff Booth, I think he's just kind of showing us the contrast he's trying to struggle with in this movie, which is the ideal of Hollywood. Because the Manson murders, that ended an era of Hollywood. It transitioned everything into a new. From false security to new young Hollywood and old Hollywood and kind of defining that moment. So I think Quentin Tarantino was really showing in each of those scenes where you have Cliff Booth who is kind of violence, and then you have Bruce Lee who's the ideal violence, the phony kind of...
Oh, that's a good,
that's interesting.
I think, one of my favorite, I guess, themes or kind of recurring ideas in the movie is almost in La La Land, the idealized Hollywood version of something, and then the real.
Yes.
But it kind of flips it, where La La Land makes it seem like the ideal Hollywood is so great, and then real life sucks. This was almost Hollywood is kind of pathetic, but the real, down-to-earth guys are, the real heroes. And I guess what I mean by that is, you get this contrast between Rick Dalton, who's, the washed-up Hollywood star, whose, big hero moment is to stop being a drunkard and, go on set and do something right.
Yeah.
It's, kind of a lame hero moment. It's still, powerful, but... and then you're contrasted with the real-life actual cowboy Cliff Booth, who lives in a trailer park, but is, just this total hero man's man, but gets no recognition.
And I think that one thing about the movie that I loved was... kind of bouncing off what you were saying, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood kind of shatters Hollywood a little bit. It's made very clear throughout the movie that movie stars and actresses and all these people, it's not necessarily as glamorous as it may seem. And at the end of the day, these people are people. And I could be totally wrong in assuming this, but I think that that's something really interesting. How Quentin Tarantino, everybody knows he has a thing with feet. This is probably his feetiest movie, let's be honest.
We're getting into the feet.
That was a good transition there, yeah, keep going.
But I think that when we see, for example, Sharon Tate's feet as she's in the movie theater, oh my gosh, what is her name? The hippie that he takes home. Pussycat, yeah. Her feet.
Really?
Yes. As they're driving in the car, like, Pussycat's feet are kind of nasty, as we can assume. She's not really walking around with shoes, like she's a hippie. But then we see Sharon Tate's feet in the movie theater. They're also kind of nasty. And I think that that's kind of like an interesting parallel of, like, Hollywood people are people at the end of the day. Like,
Wow.
it's not this glamorous necessarily lifestyle that everybody thinks it is, right? Like, and even kind of building on that, like, when Sharon Tate goes up to the box office and she's like, oh, I want to see this movie, and they kind of tell her the ticket prices, and then she's like, well, what about if you're in the movie? And they're like, you're not in the movie, like, who do you think you are? And really, even after they realize it actually is her, they're like, yeah, whatever, I guess, come in. Like, she's not necessarily treated specially, right?
That was incredible, Rachel. I'm still kind of reeling in from the fact that we took Quentin Tarantino's dirty feet thing in this movie and made it into something really profound and thought-provoking.
I mean, that's evidence to Tarantino's filming style. Maybe we've been making fun of the feet when there was really a philosophy behind them. The philosophy of feet, if you will.
One of us in the Napoleon Dynamite episode make a point out of the eggs.
Which one of us was it?
What was the point? I'm interested.
It was like something about how eggs are like represent like crossing the threshold into like.
I think that was you, James.
That sounds like a
It
you
sounds
point.
I think it's a Delicio thing.
Sorry,
of taking random objects and
What can I say?
Yeah, kind of.
finding beautiful
Kind of intellectuals
profound
like
points.
that.
Right. And, you know, even, like, at the very end of the film when Rick is walking over to Sharon's house and they're just, like, all there. They're like, hey, come in, hang out. Like, it really kind of builds off of that, like the secret life of Hollywood stars is, like, pretty much just life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's very true. Rick Dalton is still starstruck by Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, right?
Yeah.
And he's still just trying to be a good neighbor. And it's true, Tarantino wanted to sort of go past the glamorized version of Hollywood that everyone thinks of with that era and sort of show the underbelly of it. Not necessarily in a dark way, but in a realistic way. Because I don't think he too heavily discredits or credits Hollywood. He just sort of says, this is the life that they lived. Make of that what you will. And then he throws in a flamethrower and has Rick Dalton torch a girl at the end. But
yeah, the whole movie, up until, like, the last 30 minutes, was so very tame. Like, it did not have any of that, like the classic Tarantino, like, gratuitous violence. And then it just, like...
Oh.
Well,
that last scene was, like, one of the hardest things. Like... He didn't cut away from anything. Like,
it was amazing.
Noses were broken. People were slammed into brick corners. It was
beautiful.
It was really, like, tastefully done. And I like I like how it was almost like, you know, that
it was like a comical violence.
Yeah,
almost.
it's
like he was kind of like making fun of like the gratuitous.
Yeah,
violence
it's
of
like
it.
the trope where you put like a happy song over something really awful happening, like in Reservoir Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or oh my gosh, what is that movie? Is it The Conjuring or Insidious?
The Conjuring. I love The Conjuring. What
Me
happens?
Too. When they, you know, it's the Tiny Tim song, the
Tiptoe
through the tulips. Yeah, as she's like being stalked by this evil spirit.
Sounds like Insidious.
Yeah, I think it is Insidious. I love both of those movies, and I always get them a little mixed up. But yeah, no, I love that trope personally. That Reservoir Dogs scene is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had Cliff Booth high on acid while he's just completely brutalizing these people.
Right.
Awesome.
Which is like the inversion of like what actually happened. You know, like the hippies were probably tripping, and then they did all these.
Yeah,
like
right.
Manson said to like kill these people in the most gory way possible, and that's what we saw Cliff do.
Yeah.
Right. That's really a good observation. Yeah.
I think the only thing that would have elevated the scene is if they played Helter Skelter by the Beatles over it, because that was the Manson family's whole thing. Is they painted.
They would paint Helter Skelter on the walls in blood after
Oh.
their murders. Was it In Blood, or am I making that
I
up?
think it was In Blood.
No, it was in blood. They wrote something like
How?
F you
What
pigs or something.
movie
Yeah.
have you guys?
Well, I watched a documentary about the Mansons immediately after I got home.
I'm so unprepared for this.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Manson would say like, "Oh, the Beatles are speaking to me through their songs, like through Helter Skelter." He's like, "Oh, Helter Skelter told me to kill all these people," which is
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This guy was like crazy.
I'm interested to know what you guys think about the scene where Cliff goes back to the ranch with Pussycat and his whole interaction with George. Like, what did that mean to you guys?
I saw that as Quentin Tarantino kind of showing us how he can mess with our human instincts. Like, he's using that against us, kind of foreshadowing the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the whole thing up there, we got, like, this kind of, like, old Hollywood, suspicious kind of motif. Or
It was almost very
music
Hitchcock, right?
Yeah,
Super
like
very
dramatic.
suspenseful.
Yeah, suspenseful, and then nothing happened.
Right, yeah. And what I just keep going back and thinking, and I can't really, like, explain it in my own head. Like, what was the significance of his conversation with George? Like, was there any significance in George just being totally complacent? Like, oh, whatever, like, I'm just here, I don't know who you are.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that.
I always thought of it, or at least when I watched the movie, as it was just sort of a subversion of expectations that's just as terrifying as if George was captured.
Right.
Because to have someone completely complacent in that situation not only makes it so that the hippies' viewpoints, which are incredibly horrible and, I mean, they murder people, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
they can't be good. To see that they can so easily convince people like that is incredibly terrifying.
Yeah, it's scary
Yeah.
to see just how he's totally being taken advantage of, and
Yeah.
there's nothing you can do about it. And that happens that's almost like a little bit of hot commentary, like abuse of the elderly in situations like that happens all the time. And it was kind of interesting. It's like it's a really scary thing. Like there's you could be totally being exploited and extorted, and there's nothing. Even if you are aware, which it's unclear whether George knows, there's just nothing you can do about it at all.
Yeah.
But I also saw the ranch as like the epitome of Cliff Booth's real life cowboy hero action, because it happens around the same time as we're getting Rick's walk to across the set to confront his own inner demons. We're getting Cliff Booth walking to confront these real life murderers on its creepy ranch, and it's like, oh, this guy's like an actual total like hero guy. That's that's what that scene was to me, I guess.
Oh, for sure. And do you guys think there's any significance that the stuntman in this case, the one that's behind the scenes, is the real hero instead of the actor? Is that
Yes.
a commentary on something?
Yeah, I think that's totally back to the theme of the sort of fake Hollywood versus real life thing that we kind of talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was actually having a conversation about something kind of similar with a friend recently. Like, the people that live in like the mansions in Pasadena, like San Marino, Glendale, like all these places that aren't even necessarily LA, like those aren't celebrities. Like those are people that are behind the scenes more. Like maybe they're a producer, maybe they work in music, or are, like celebrity hairstylists can make like $500,000 a year. Like it's like people, there is like sometimes I think like the behind the scenes people actually can have more importance in some
Impact,
ways.
right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, definitely. A lot of the times they have more say in the productions. I mean, a movie is entirely controlled by the producers almost, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And the celebrities are merely acting out the vision of, or in most cases are merely acting out the vision of the producers or the director or
Right.
whatever, right?
Right.
But we assign almost all of the excellence of a movie onto them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if a movie is bad, then we immediately associate that with, like, oh, that's a stain on this
acting.
actor's
Yeah.
reputation, which is weird, because we don't do that with producers, because no one really knows the producers, right?
Yeah.
Right. I feel like the one exception to that really sticks out to me, which kind of makes me sad because I do like a lot of his work, is M. Night Shyamalan. Like, everybody loves to, like, bag on M. Night Shyamalan. Which is, like, so funny to me, because, like, that is an example of people actually kind of blaming the director more, but, yeah, no, that's true. I think a lot of the time when a movie kind of tanks, people are like, ugh, those darn actors, like, yeah.
It's whoever's the voice of it, and you can see that in a lot of videos on YouTube, actually, because for bigger channels where they have scripted videos, usually the person who's saying the script, the voice actor, isn't the one that wrote it.
Right.
Yeah.
But if there's hate towards the video, it's directed at the voice actor, because they just assign all of the value onto the spokesperson.
Yeah, channels like Polygon and Vox and things like that. Like, the poor reporters aren't writing that stuff. Like, don't shoot the messenger.
Exactly.
I wanted to get your guys' takes on Sharon Tate, Margot Robbie's character. Because, like, it seemed to me like in the trailers and the promotion, they were sort of hyping her up as, like the big three in the movie are Rick Dalton, Cliff Booth, and Sharon Tate. But then, really, like, the only scenes we get of Sharon Tate, for the bulk of the second, like, act of the movie is just, like, watching a movie with her feet up. So I just wanted to, like, I guess get your guy, Hallie, you've got tons of notes. I'm sure you've got stuff to say on this. Did you think that she was, like, I felt that she might have been a little bit underused or things like that. And I wanted to get your guys' opinions.
I mean, what I kind of got from it was Quentin is trying to do the idea of the Manson murders. Like, he's kind of portraying the idea of what happened. And so by not having Sharon Tate be kind of like the center focus and having her parallel Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth, he's kind of showing, like, the duality almost of Hollywood. Like, he has more freedom to explore different parts of Hollywood instead of just focusing on Sharon Tate's story specifically. But I love how he just kind of, like, has her as a rumor throughout the whole movie. Like, we're just kind of, like, seeing her kind of, what's the word? Like, prowess almost? I don't know.
Yeah, she's very elusive.
Right, like, she's mysterious, but we kind of get the idea of her.
That's
almost,
okay.
like,
Yeah, that's a really I think that's a good take on it. I didn't really think about it like that.
Because she's also connected to this big theme of books I found in the movie. There's a big theme of books and storytelling that comes up. Like that whole scene where Rick Dalton is talking to Marabella. And they're talking about stories, and she's like, no, I don't want to hear the whole story. I want to hear the idea of the story, Rick. And so that conversation...
And Sharon Tate is like the idea of Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
We've been red-pilled. we're going in deep now.
I think that's really interesting, and I don't know if this is related or not, but also like we were kind of saying, Sharon Tate almost feels underused in the movie. I think she also was kind of like underused in real life. Like, she didn't have a chance to get big because of this fateful event. Like, and I think it's so interesting that the whole movie, like, we go in, most of us at least, especially I think like older generations that like were growing up when this was when the Manson family was like happening, is like oh my gosh, I totally just lost what I was gonna say.
Okay, well, while you think of that, I was talking to you, Hallie, earlier, way earlier when we first saw the movie, and you had this fantastic point about how Quentin Tarantino, for the entire movie, it's like he's just playing in his sandbox, right?
Yes.
Do you care to explain that?
Well, yeah, this whole movie, he's, like I said, he's this idea of a movie. He's kind of like, has like this story he goes off of, and he's like, I'm just gonna build whatever I want off of it and kind of explore all these different themes. Which I actually kind of saw also like another playground thing, like that whole scene where we have Rick Dalton doing his first scene on the ranch.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like we're seeing the actors just play in this big set playground. Yeah. And like it was like that 15-minute sequence, and at first people might be like, oh, why are we watching like just actors act? But it's seeing them each find like their identity and kind of like happiness.
And that was all one fat long take too. Yeah. That was really cool.
Oh, so good.
It was so good though.
I will not lie. I was a little bit sleepy when we first started to watch a movie, and that just happened. I felt really bad because that, like, I love long takes, and that just happened to be the part where, like, the sleepy kicked in. I didn't fall asleep, but that was a really cool scene in retrospect, and I wish I got to appreciate it a little more.
Yeah.
But curse my sleepiness.
Yeah.
Well, and Leonardo DiCaprio's acting during that, I thought, stood out to me in such a insane way. The anger that he can, or that he portrayed when they show the kidnapping scene where he's with the little girl.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was amazing.
And that's when, at that moment you see him let go of all these things that were holding him back, all these self-doubts, all these things, and he just lets the emotions loose. He just lets it all go, and that's sort of, it's something that Tarantino loves to do in his movies, and I think you can expand this to the entire Once Upon a Time in Hollywood thing. The entire movie, it's very structured and paced, and you feel like there's a definite story going on. But once you get to the end, it's just catharsis.
Oh, yeah, for
Like,
sure.
a massive amount of release of emotion and intensity and energy.
Yeah.
And Tarantino does this wonderful thing, like you said, Hallie, where he has the point of his movie, and then he just sprinkles in little things that, on retrospect, you're like, oh my god, it was so obvious the entire time.
Yeah.
Like, the first, like, hour and a half, 2 hours of the movie don't really, like you said, as you're watching it, like, it feels like there's a plot, but the first 2 hours are really just kind of like, here are some characters, let's just put them in scenarios and just, like, look at all these fun little scenes with them.
Yeah. And I think that kind of, I remembered what I was going to say. It's so interesting to me that Tarantino, obviously we know he's good at rewriting history, let's call it, but, this kind of notion of, like, okay, so, like, what would have happened if they literally, the Manson family, just went to the wrong address? Like, it's like one little thing, like Rick Dalton is, like, mad, he's wasted, he hears this noisy muffler outside, and he's like, go away, like, what are you doing here? And then that kind of spurs them on to be like, wait a minute, was that Rick Dalton? And I think it was really interesting, the scene where that one girl in the Manson family was like, these are the people that taught us how to kill. Like, that was just, like, an interesting note that she had, right? She was like, these are the people that taught us how to kill. Like, it's their fault we're like this. Let's show them that they, like, this kind of, like, glamorized Hollywood, like, it's kind of, she's kind of blaming glamorized Hollywood violence, whatever, for the way that they are, which is interesting because Tarantino continues to be so violent.
Yeah.
And, like, like, what would that look like in a modern day scenario?
It's almost like he's acknowledging the, because especially, like, right now, there's a lot of hot talk about, things like media and video games being the cause of violence, like this Manson girl was saying. And it's almost like Quentin Tarantino is acknowledging this. He's like, this is what people are saying. That's stupid. I'm going to throw in the most intense, like, beat down in cinematic history.
But what I noticed is, like, in the theater, everyone was laughing during that
Yes.
scene. Like,
Oh,
no one was like...
I was clenching it. Oh.
Like, the emotion was just so raw, but, like, people couldn't help but just laugh at it because
Yeah.
it was so
I was
vibrant.
laughing and screaming the entire time. My theater was, like, roaring.
Yeah, there was lots of, like, oohs and ah.
Yeah. It's almost very, like, comic book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I wrote, like, comical.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, and it just, like, he's trying to build this reality, and it's an incredibly real take on Hollywood. And then, I think, at the very end, in the best way, he breaks all of the rules he'd set before, but in a way that is structured and makes sense in the story.
Yeah.
He has his main character pull out a flamethrower and crisp a girl to, like, a crisp, I guess you could say. And it's just, as you guys said, an entirely comic booky thing. But you want it to happen, and it makes sense. It was a Chekhov's gun that they most certainly brought back in the best way I've seen. My favorite Chekhov's gun that I've seen yet. And Tarantino just knows when to stop being so serious.
Yeah, props to that girl in the pool for surviving being mangled by the coolest dog in a movie ever.
Yeah.
Slammed into all sorts of brick corners and telephone spikes.
Oh my gosh.
Burned, somehow make it into a pool.
And then continue, like, flail around and shoot
It
a
was
gun.
so
Amazing.
much, and it doesn't cut, like, normally if you see a guy about to slam this person's head into a, brick fireplace corner, they're gonna cut away. Nope.
It stayed right on it.
And bam, it was some of the most, like, unadulterated violence I've ever seen, but it was, like, great.
He really didn't try to make it anything he wasn't. He was just like, no, this is literally just gonna be gratuitous violence for the last 40 minutes of the movie. And we were all like,
good.
okay.
Yeah.
It was just a big middle finger to everyone who doesn't like him. And he's such an unabashed filmmaker, and he loves his personality so much, and I love that he loves his personality so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was really, really interesting is that the like with the whole theme of the Manson family, and even just looking at like the demographics of the theater, this movie was really catered towards an older audience. For sure. Like, it is not made for our generation at all.
Right, it's like just steeped in nostalgia almost.
Yeah.
Because, like, yeah, like we were saying for a little bit, these are the people who grew up with, it was really made for the generation that grew up with the Manson family murders being, like, a formative event. Like, I did not know anything about the Manson family, and then the movie ended, and my mom turned to me, and she was like, in real life, the Manson family murdered Sharon Tate that night. And I was like, oh, it makes sense why this is cool now. I thought it was cool to be cool.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying about this kind of being catered to an older audience, like, while it is, I think, plot-wise, it's so... Tarantino did an amazing job of catering it to such a wide audience. Because there's the older generations that, like, were alive when this was happening, and this was, like, a hot-button topic, and everybody was, like, so engulfed in the chaos of the Manson family. But also, he kind of brought it back to the younger generation's level by using this absolutely star-studded cast of people like Margot Robbie from Suicide Squad. Like, this is, like, an accessible character to us.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt, obviously. Leonardo DiCaprio is, like, one of the most talked about actors of our time. And even bringing in Maya Hawke, yeah.
Robin from Stranger Things.
Yeah, Robin from Stranger Things, which was just this huge thing that happened. And Tarantino obviously loves his leading ladies, because Maya Hawke is Uma Thurman's daughter.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that was really nice.
Yeah, so I think that, like, while it was just, I think, so well catered to such a huge scope of people.
Do you think that complements his theme of young Hollywood and old Hollywood?
Whoa!
Yes, that is a good point. Absolutely, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was funny that when we walked into the movie theater, it was almost entirely all, like, older folks. I thought that was crazy. Like, I wouldn't expect them to...
Go see a Tarantino movie.
Yeah, and my mom, who
hates violence,
despises Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
She hates it. She was like, she said to Rachel and I, she was like, hey, do you guys want to go see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
And we were like, it's the guy that did Pulp Fiction, right?
And she was like, yeah. And then after the movie, she was like...
That was so good.
She was like, oh, wow, that was really good. I like that a lot. And it's like, what? I think it's crazy how well it appealed to that sort of...
It kind of, like, blended the two.
Yeah.
Old and young, you know?
Yeah.
The audiences, even.
Absolutely bananas.
I mean, that's a testament to its greatness, is all of us are teenagers. I'm assuming you are, right?
I'm 20.
20.
Yeah.
Basically teenagers. My point still stands. We're all very young people, so to see that this movie was so interesting to us, even though, I mean, all of us had very little knowledge of the Manson murders. I knew the movie was about the Manson murders, and I knew that Sharon Tate was supposed to die, but, like, besides that, absolutely nothing.
Right.
It's a testament to how great Tarantino is at structuring history, where he takes you through this real-life story, and then he carries it along in such an imaginative way that only film or some creative medium can pull off. And he understands the craft so incredibly well, and what he can do inside, like Hallie said, his own playground, his own sandbox.
Yeah, the cinematography was on point for the whole movie. Like the first shot that, like, pulls away, and then you realize that it pulls away, like, from the driveway, and then you realize that the camera's in the car the whole time.
Yes.
Like, how do you even do that?
Yeah.
It's got to be some sort of blend of, like, digital zoom while actually pulling away, and that's really hard to do.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that is crazy. I think it was kind of... I mean, the only other... I'm ashamed to say the only other Tarantino movie that I've seen is Pulp Fiction. I'm working on it. But they felt like you could tell that they were both made by Quentin Tarantino, but, like, it's almost, like, interesting how he's evolved, because, like, Pulp Fiction, people know it for it being, like, a witty, dialogue-driven movie. And, like, dialogue is what people know Pulp Fiction for. But then in this movie, it was almost like a different style of script writing. Like, it didn't have that witty back and forth the whole time. It was a lot more focused on, I think, the themes and the story and the cinematography, rather than that classic, like, Tarantino writing. That could have just been me not paying attention as much as I should have, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
No, you're right. He definitely tried to enrich us into that past. Like, like the first scene, we're sitting down at, like, the table with the agent. Like, that's, like, our wide shot, Like, he's seeding us into, like, this setting that he's setting up for us.
Yeah.
Like, we got Cielo Drive in, like, one of the first shots.
Yeah.
We got the hippies, we've got... We're already having a meeting with an agent about... And we're seeing clips of Rick Dalton. Like, he's just setting it up for us and kind of setting us into it just to, like, breathe it in.
Yeah. I feel like the more traditional writing may have even been, like, a conscious choice to sort of take us back into the older golden age of Hollywood. Now that I'm just, like, trying to make connections. Everything this guy does is intentional. It feels like it's
for sure.
Crazy.
I mean, he's like a gorier Wes Anderson.
Yeah. I love Wes Anderson.
He's totally like if Wes Anderson... like just listened to heavy metal his entire life, and then that's what became of him. But Tarantino, he's made other cowboy movies before. He made Django Unchained, and Hateful Eight, which are both amazing films, and I love them to pieces. But this one, I think, I like it above those two, and for some reason he captured the spirit of what it means to be a cowboy in such an interesting way. And I think it's because of the entire duality of the entire film, where he's showing the realism of it, but then also the idealized version. And it makes you appreciate the idealized version so much more when you know what they're working off of. And to see real life, like, gritty violence like what Cliff Booth portrays, it's just incredibly endearing in a way, I guess I could say, where you just love the character so much more than... Personally, I love Cliff Booth way more than Django or any of the characters from Hateful Eight because he feels much more grounded in the world that he's in. Yeah.
Yeah. I read a really interesting article that I thought was such a good, like, it rings so true to me that it was saying that Brad Pitt is a character actor trapped in a movie star's body. And I was
so
like,
true.
That's so true, because the whole time you're watching the movie, it's just like, this is such a testament to Brad Pitt. I don't know if, I didn't know he was capable of this personally, but, like, it's such a testament to, like, he is, like, this mega superstar. Like, everybody thinks he's, like, hot stuff. Like, everybody's like, oh my gosh, Brad Pitt. But for me, at least, when I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I didn't feel like I was watching Brad Pitt. I felt like I was watching Cliff Booth. Like, he really embodied the character so well that it wasn't like, I am watching Brad Pitt play Cliff Booth. It was like, I am watching Cliff Booth.
People underestimate Brad Pitt's acting skills to an insane degree that I can no longer stand.
Right.
Inglourious Bastards, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Burn After Reading, I think, are three fantastic films that show off how great Brad Pitt is at embodying these different roles. I mean, like, he's not the most diverse actor, but he's incredibly diverse. I mean, like, in Burn After Reading, which I'm not sure if you guys have heard of or not, it's a Coen Brothers movie. It's like a spy comedy. It's very Coen Brothers-y, but he plays this personal trainer who's, like, a really dumb, like, fit, good-looking guy who's charming, but in a much different way than what Cliff Booth is. Like, he's sort of ditzy and goes around like, here's my massive smile, like, and he's such a great comedic actor, and he's such a great serious, dramatic actor. And Tarantino just knows how to bring out those things in such a wonderful way that a lot of other Brad Pitt movies don't really get.
Give him credit for,
I think Cliff Booth's character, and it's almost like if you so usually when you're writing a character, you have their good traits and you have their flaws. But I think it was almost like he took that idea of having, like, quality heroic traits and flaws and separated that into two characters, with Rick Dalton being the flaws and Cliff Booth being the good traits.
Wow,
Because Rick Dalton is all the self-doubt and all the, alcoholism and everything that would normally just be seen as like, oh, here's this character's flaw. But that's all Rick Dalton. And then you have Cliff Booth, who's almost this, like, true, pure of heart, do-gooder cowboy. Like, everything you see he's always straight. Even when he has to, get violent at the end, he's not doing it to be gratuitous. He's, you know,
He's doing to survive.
It's a home
justified.
invasion. Yeah. Or like he turns down Pussycat's offers. You know, he's like, no, you're not 18. Like, it's just like stuff like that. Very interesting that he's like this complete pure of heart guy, yet he's behind the scenes. And then Rick Dalton, who's a little bit more flawed and damaged, is the star.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too how the movie kind of keeps making references and cuts back to like this rumor that Cliff Booth killed his wife.
Yeah.
And we never really find out more. Like, we get little snippets, but it's never really made very clear, which I think is interesting. Is that like kind of an allusion to like you can be a good person who has made bad decisions, or like I think it's interesting to think about how that ties in.
Or even like people will try and make bad rumors to ground good people. Like, oh, that person's too good to be true. They must have done something, right? Let's stir the pot.
Honestly, that was not one of my favorite parts of the movie, where they kept cutting back to that.
I know you don't like mystery boxes, so I was interested on your...
It's not necessarily the mystery box thing, but you're right, I don't really like mystery boxes too much. But it's just, there's not a clear point to what it's trying to say. Like, both you and your sister made incredibly great points on what it could mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both of those are equally as valid, but there's no message that he's trying to put forward, or at least that I know of currently. I'm sure there's, you know, some dudes look through it and there's like 15 references to that scene and, oh, this is what it all means. But it just wasn't clear enough for me to really strike home any thematic point on first viewing, because I've only watched this movie once.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm sure on the second viewing I'll probably get something, and I mean, Hallie's watched it twice and has a book full of napkins with her, but actually, Hallie, is there anything you noticed about that scene that makes it more substantial than...
The harpoon scene where he's on the boat?
Yeah, or just that rumor necessarily in the movie
rumor
that makes it more substantial than what I think it could be.
A good point that my mother actually brought up was actually a theme of masculinity and the undertone of masculinity, so maybe that could be something appealing to that. Because I personally didn't get much either, but when I thought about it, I was like, maybe that's showing kind of that mindset almost.
Now,
it complements it.
I might be stupid and really missed something, but were there multiple cutbacks, like flashbacks? Because all I remember is him being on the boat with his wife, and his wife is just giving him a bunch of crap. That's the only... Was there more that I
thought there was only one, but just a bunch of references to it.
Oh,
yeah, there's only one.
Because I remember, hearing somewhere that there's a scene where you see Cliff Booth, thinking about whether or not he's gonna do it. But then it's like...
Yeah, and that was on the boat.
That was that? Oh, because that's not what I got from that. I was just like, oh, this is an unhappy couple. My brain didn't think... He's thinking about whether or not he wants to kill his wife.
He had the harpoon on his lap.
Yeah, well, he had the harpoon, and she's like, you're such a jerk, I hate you. And he's just like... He's sort of stone-faced, and he's sort of looking at the ground a little bit with the harpoon on his leg, right?
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, so then you are left up to decide, oh, did he actually kill his wife? And we never figure out how his wife got killed, so we don't even know if it was by the harpoon or not.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was expecting
Which
something.
Which is what makes me even more angry.
I was expecting something... Maybe Tarantino's referencing himself. He loves to give us stuff and then not answer it. Briefcase.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about Pulp Fiction and the whole briefcase.
Yeah, maybe he's doing a self-reference to the briefcase.
See, the briefcase is different, in my mind, because the briefcase... There's a plot that revolves around it, right?
Yeah.
In this, nothing necessarily revolves around him. Like, people are like, oh, you're such a bad dude because you killed your wife, and, like, he still gets all the opportunities that would have barred him from. I mean, he still gets the stunt double job at the ranch, even though everyone's like, oh, he killed his wife.
Yeah.
And he's kicked off not because the lady... Who really didn't want him to be on there because of the rumors said, oh, you have to leave. It's because he fought Bruce Lee and threw him into a car, right?
Yeah. Oh, that part kind of confused me, as I was trying to keep the timeline straight, because there's a lot of just, cuts to flashbacks without announcing it.
Yeah.
And was the Bruce Lee fight happening on the same set simultaneously as Rick was acting, or was this a flashback to a previous job? Because I really...
It was a flashback
to a previous job, because it cuts back to him on the roof. Because he was thinking, oh, why couldn't I still have...
Oh, that was... Okay, yeah, that was I was trying to figure it out, the tunnel of flashbacks that it kind of takes you down.
Yeah, because remember when he drops Rick off at the set, he's like, oh, make sure to ask the stunt guy, like, if you need me. And Rick was like, yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you. Like, the people are good friends with that
Randy.
guy's wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably not even worth asking. And then it cuts back to why it's not even worth asking.
Which kind of shows
Okay, now I get it.
I saw that as a contrast to seeing how Cliff Booth dealt with his insecurity almost, and how Rick Dalton deals with it, because he just spiraled down and he just laughed about it afterwards. He was like,
Yeah,
I
just like,
guess.
Yeah,
I was
fair
just
enough.
me."
Yeah.
But then we see, like, in the trailer how Rick Dalton deals with his insecurities.
That was a
almost.
really cool scene. I love that kind of thing where it's like the camera's in one spot, but it's cutting through different points in time like that. Almost.
So good.
I really like that sort of thing.
It shows you almost the calculated descent that he went through. Rick Dalton in that trailer scene where it's like, this was going on for a long period of time, right?
Yeah,
and it's a constant spiral.
It's funny to think that Leonardo DiCaprio probably had to just stand in there shouting and screaming for like 5-10 minutes just so that they could cut to different points in it.
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Oh, and DiCaprio is another great Tarantino actor. He, in Django, there's this one scene where he slams his fist on a glass, and it cuts him. He actually slammed his fist on an actual glass and actually cut himself. And what he did, and this is my favorite part, there was this lady standing next to him who was meant to be scared in the scene. What he did is he stood up, and he put his real bloody hand on her face and rubbed it across it. And she was legitimately terrified for the entire thing. And Tarantino just let that roll. And that's such a great Tarantino thing, where he just has this playground and he lets people go crazy in it.
I love stuff like that. Like, didn't the actor of Aragorn in Lord of the Rings, when he kicked the helmet?
He actually broke his toe, and so him, like, screaming on the top of the hill is because he literally broke his toe.
Oh,
like, yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Tarantino really, like, he goes the extra mile. Like, I remember seeing behind-the-scenes footage of the Uma Thurman dancing scene in Pulp Fiction, and Tarantino's right behind the camera doing the dance, mirroring Travolta doing the dance moves.
Amazing.
And it's just like, this guy does the most, like, for his craft. It's really awe-inspiring.
He's such a great nerd. I love him. But if anyone has some final things they want to say, Hallie, in your wide textbook, your encyclopedia of knowledge, is there anything you want to get into?
I mean, one thing I actually want to bring up with James is this theme of radios. Like, we're always hearing music.
Yeah.
In every scene, there's always record playing everything. And at the end, when Rick Dalton, the radio actually falls into the pool. So I was wondering what you think that kind of is. Because I thought it was like, the movie's being culturally aware. Because sometimes there'd be an announcer talking about Vietnam. And other things like that. But what was the significance you think that was?
I think it could be, like we were saying, how the Manson family brings about the end of the golden age of Hollywood. You could almost say, like, that the radio is just kind of doubling that. Like, because it falls in the pool during the Manson attack.
Yes.
And up until this point, throughout the whole golden age of Hollywood, old money part of the movie, the radio is always playing. But then during the Manson attack, the radio falls in the pool and stops. And it's sort of like signifying, okay, the end of an era. Like, it's done here.
It's
That's
almost
symbolism.
like, right, exactly. It's almost kind of like a record scratch, huh? Like a,
there we go.
This is not really, like, and I think that exactly what you guys said. Like, when the radio falls in the pool, it kind of shatters anything left of this idealized world that Rick Dalton has in his head. It's like the radio, like, falling in the pool and inevitably breaking is kind of signifies, like, nothing's ever going to be the same, which was which was true in real life too. Like, after the Manson murders, like, nothing was ever the same. People were like, okay, like, this is not this idealized world that we think we live in.
Right.
End of an era, and I think that's a fantastic point and an incredible way to view Tarantino's movies. Is there's these little tiny details that mean so much, and if that's not a hallmark of a great filmmaker, then I don't really know what is. If you can put that much care into such small things where you can make, I mean, like we did, theories about every little thing, every little shot, every little book or movie or whatever. Everything is put in there for a reason. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a fantastic film because of that. It's a thoughtful and structured analysis of what Hollywood is in one of the most emotional, in a great way that's, not necessarily depressing or anything like that, but one of the most emotional films that I've seen recently.
Yeah, for sure.
And does anyone else have anything they would like to say?
I think that was a really poetic final statement.
I know. I was gonna say that's a good way to wrap it
Good
up.
way to wrap it up. All
If
right.
you guys have seen the movie for one time, see it again. Because when I saw it twice, the brilliance really shone out in it. You were able to see this is the end and kind of see it unfold, and it was just really amazing to watch.
That's awesome.
All right. Well,
For sure. Thank you guys so much for watching this podcast. We have a ton of episodes that are backlogged on your favorite watching platforms, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
yeah, Apple Podcasts, iTunes,
Anchor, all the places where good podcasts
Just
are.
Google us and then click on everything.
Yeah, exactly. Just subscribe to us and everything. But please like the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure to tell us in the comments what you thought of either the movie or us. We always like to read them and respond to as many as we can. And yeah.
I think that's a we've been Socratic Cinema moment.
We've been Socratic Cinema. Adios.
Adios.